think that in the future I would just say, because I didn't set the requirements for the class, but they were. But I would then say, okay, ask students to read only one book, probably The Great Theft.
Yeah,
and because I think students who are worried about exams and things like that, if they look at speaking God's name, Grace yesterday was telling me about some group, and someone wrote a message to other people in that group, a reading group, and he's saying, I am starting to slug through Abu El Fadl's speaking in God's name. It is very dense and very difficult, but I'm trying to persevere. And so, that's sort of interesting. Of course, compared to the material that I read in the tradition,
of course.
It's very difficult for me to think of this as very dense. But
maybe I also have the same opinion because, I read the first chapter in your induction chapter,
right.
and after that, it is very, and after that I read the Great Theft. For me, wow, it's much easier than to because you make a great compilation of how the traditions talk about authoritativeness, but for me it's very 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 influential and good information for me. So in my opinion, there's a scholar, because I never read your book before. Actually, my university asked me to find one of your book, the God Soldier.
No, but God was a soldier. So.
I tried to find it in the Leiden, but most of them said that we don't have the book, and possibly you cannot order it because they said that they don't publish it again. And wow, that's a pity then. And then
it's actually it is still in print.
Is it in print? Yeah. Okay. Maybe I can.
That's actually, I've heard this from so many people, but I think the difference is if you go to the Amazon US instead of Amazon UK.
Okay.
But I even think Amazon UK has it. I've seen but yes, this is sort of a comment. Grace, and God Was a Soldier is still in print, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, because it's like. How we keep hearing this rumor about it being out of print and.
No, it's not out of print.
Yeah, maybe because I went to a local bookstore, so that
I don't know, but and God Knows the Soldier it's a intermediate between the Great Theft and Speaking God's Name, and it is it's a process by which my first book is my most difficult book, The Rebellion and Violence, Islamic Law. And
can I start typing?
Oh, sure, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm going to go out too, okay? So
So the most difficult, the most challenging is Rebellion and Violence. And you of course come to there is a very philosophical position that you find yourself in, right? I was trained at the hands of successive jurists. Each jurist gave me ijaza at the end too. And on the one hand, one of my sheikhs, one of the jurists, Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali, may Allah bless his soul, believed very much that the role of a sheikh is to interact with the public. And he very much believed that you can write books for other specialists, but you ultimately have to enter the process of speaking to lay people. And if you don't, then you've
Hi.
Hello.
I got a friend now.
Yeah, we were saying.
Oh, ja, tuurlijk. Sorry.
Yeah.
Dat is wel fijn om te doen.
We were saying this is going to be a tutorial. But
I have a friend now, eventually.
The other, your friend?
Yeah, maybe he will come tomorrow, but not today.
one is sick and one is missing. And no, they're actually two sick.
Too sick. Oh.
Two sick and one missing.
So you're having a very, very small group.
Well, you know, I think the tapings and modern technology, it's a mixed blessing because here you are. We were just
There's some
talking
change in the train route, so I have to change 4 times.
I thought it was me now.
Yeah, so okay, we have a formal class now.
Yeah.
Well,
Today is the only day that I'm
Can-
free in the midday, so that I can
Well,
come.
you know, this is sort of Tuesday and then Wednesday and then Thursday and that's it. You know, the last day is Thursday. So, you know, it's not much. So, I mean, it's good that you're here today, and then if you can't make it the rest of the days, I hope it was worthwhile anyway.
Tomorrow I have to work till 3 o'clock, and Thursday also, but my school is only 10 minutes by bike from here, so
Yeah, so
it's very easy for me to come here, and my house is just 2 minutes away, so
that's quite good. Well, this is, I think, yours. I think
no, it's not mine.
Not yours?
No.
Oh, okay. So, anyway, all right. We had started talking about sort of. We actually talking about my own work, and I was saying that my first book in English, because I've written things in Arabic, but my first work in English is the most difficult, and I had teachers in the school of thought that produces jurists not of the Wahhabi tradition, not of the Puritan tradition, which is actually then you can trace which jurist licensed which jurist all the way to the companions. So, you know, I can tell you who my teachers are, and then who their teachers, and so on, so all the way to about 1400 years ago. And so I think one of the most influential jurists in my life is Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali. And his view was that you have to engage the public. The idea of a scholar, intellectual who only speaks to scholars is he thought is intellectual laziness. But at the same time, he was a very charismatic person, and he could write beautifully. I mean, he wrote his books. You know, he was capable of writing very complex texts that can only be read by specialists, and then he was capable of writing very accessible texts. Then, but this is one school of thought, right? Another, which is another one of my teachers, Atul Hussein Mudarrisi, who, you know, his point of view is quite different. His view is there has to be an atmosphere ready to receive. Sort of the general consciousness has to be ready to listen to a scholarly voice before a scholarly voice can be effective. And so his view was that we are in a historical period where your work is best directed to other scholars until the circumstances are conducive to. So, in other words, it's like if a scholar is you could imagine a scholar as a huge, truck, as compared to a car that navigates the streets, right? And you say, well, you can't take a truck and try to drive in the streets. And so, كل ميسر إلى ما خلق له. As the prophet's words say, that God gives different people different facilities, and people should recognize their own facilities, their own talents, and that's what they should. So initially, I wrote with only specialists in mind, and then, but increasingly, as I got affected by the environment around me, the public atmosphere, I tried to become more and more accessible. And of course, in accessibility, there's a danger, and that is you are watering down a lot of issues. So if you compare the great theft to speaking God's name, speaking to God's name is you have to, it's not a book to read, it's a book to study. Right? The great theft is a book to read, and I have not resolved in my own mind what's. All I know is that my consciousness draws me to either try to drive a car at times to reach everyone, or try to drive a truck at times to only reach particular. Ultimately, because it's very, your time and space is limited in this temporal world, you have to make decisions as to priorities, and that's inevitable. But
do you, specify yourself to one of the school of thoughts?
The school in which I trained, and the school to which I would feel comfortable associating myself with, are known as the Usulis. And if you've ever heard of the, I don't have a backbone. If you've ever heard of the Akhbari Usuli controversy in the Shia world, or the Ahl al-Hadith Usuli controversy in the Sunni world, it's fundamentally a controversy between the textualists, literalists, and various schools of thoughts that reject literalism as too narrow to be able to represent the magnanimity of the divine. That it is not only that the Creator is not only that God is too rich for literalism, but creation itself is too complex for literalism. And so in the Usuli school, various methods are, so for instance, in the Usuli school, when you train in Islamic law, remember this is only a school of thought for jurists. It only focuses on jurisprudence, fiqh, and it is not so it's in many ways you're training as a clergy, but it's not a puritanical clergy, I actually was just this Saturday I was meeting with someone else from belongs to the same tradition. He's a generation behind me, but we were talking about our the fate of this methodology and the whole pedagogy of of our teachers and passing on the tradition and the ijazas and licensing and so on. But the part of the big controversy is that the puritanical Ahl al-Hadith, Akhbaris, literalists, textualists, if you want to call it, all of this are labels used, right? I don't like labels like fanatics or extremists because that starts getting to be very, but they've traditionally de-emphasized memory. And actually you got licensed as an authority by showing that you've memorized. So and you've probably, if you think of your own cultural setting, you've probably witnessed it. You come and you recite the Quran from cover to cover, or you recite Riyadh al-Salihin, book of hadith, or you recite, and it is what decides your status is your ability to memorize. The Usuli school de-emphasized memory and said, memory, of course, with writing became not the issue. The issue became substantive questions that memory tries to preserve. Memory basically is a tool. And now, of course, in the age of computers and so on, and the dissemination of information, there is sort of a much deeper question of, okay, so an authority, what is an authority supposed to be? A repository of the tradition, simply preserving it, and it's like a vending machine. You put in a coin and it comes out, so you push a button and it gives you the answer? Or is it really a processing center that takes in and analyzes all types of things and acknowledges its subjectivity in doing so, and says, well, and that's why for the Usulis, for instance, they never say, they will never say, God wants you to do X or Y. They will say, I believe what God would want you to do is X or Y. Or in my view, sometimes I'll even talk in terms of preference. What is closer to the Sirat al-Mustaqim, to the straight path, is X or Y. One of the things about the Usuli school is that it is discursive, meaning it leaves open-ended. It's sort of it celebrates diversity and pluralism as not a mistake to be fixed, but as the part of the objective of God. That when the Quran says that God has created you, tribes and nations, so you will come to know one another, or if God would have wished, everyone would have become a Muslim, but God does not wish it. And the Usuli school basically comes to this existential question and says, well, if the Quran tells us that it is impossible till the final day for all the world to become Muslim, it's an article of faith for Usuli that will never happen. Not upon an apocalyptic event, or not upon a Messiah or non-Messiah. Until the world ends, it will never be that everyone will become Muslim. And it is that as part of the will of God, and they point very clearly to various. And in fact, not only that, but the Quran seems to tell you the opposite, that God knows that the battle was between good and bad is an ongoing battle that continues till you meet God. I mean, and then God resolves your differences upon in the final day, or God judges. So the Sunni school, it is not that it doesn't judge; it could judge, but there's a difference between moral judgment and a rejection of alternative judgments, and you know, it is not a school of moral relativism. I mean, there is a morality that ultimately it accepts. The question is what methodology. So, you know, Sunni school does use reason, does use intuitionism, does use spiritualism, and text as well. And many of the schools of thought that distinguish one Usuli orientation from another is how they, you know, what do you call it? Not the formula, the recipe between the text, spirit, intuition, and reason, right? And so you will have the Usuli school of Al-Ghazali, or the Usuli school of Subki, or the Usuli school of Suyuti, or, you know, and they will argue about, well, okay, reason can resolve this type of question, or cannot resolve this type of question, or on this particular set of issues, the text is decisive or not decisive. But ultimately, difference, human diversity, is taken as a foregone conclusion. Differences in languages and customs and cultures and everything, and it is not an illness. It is actually something to be celebrated. It is a manifestation of the richness of the divine. God is as rich, or God is at least as rich as the richness of creation. And you know, they very much like the mystical school, which, you know, poses a question: why is remarkable diversity in creatures and life, manifestations of life, and you know, the Quran says that God creates because God is within God's nature. God creates because this is an act of beauty, and creation, khalq, is always paralleled with the notion of beauty, al-husn. And the deconstruction or the destruction of creation is always paralleled with what? There is a critical word that the Quran uses all the time: fasad, corruption, right? And when you tell a Muslim this, and they just think about it, say, oh my God, yes, yes. I read the Quran, and I know that this is what it talks about. Fasad fil ard, the destruction. So the Quran describes the destruction of homes as corruption, destruction of nature as corruption, destruction of mosques as corruption, destruction of churches, synagogues as corruption. In fact, even war itself is, I mean, there's this famous debate whether in war is an inherent evil that can be tolerated at times or not, whether war can ever be good. So whether you can describe an act of destruction under any circumstances as husn, as part of beauty or not. So that's another critical, thing about. Yesterday we were talking about submission and notions of what's the idea of submission in Islam, and we're talking about the ultimately submission is a state of consciousness. And this is for the vast majority of theological schools in Islam, except for the puritanical school, which was on the margins of the Islamic civilization. One of the things after classes I thought about, do you know during the Inquisition, when it was around the end, I'm sorry?
8th century?
It was the end of the 1400s, beginning of the 1500s, when Muslims are finally expelled or forcibly converted from Andalusia, from Spain. So this is the 9th, 10th century Islamic, right? One of the events that sort of both Muslims and non-Muslims have conveniently sort of just put at the back of their memories is when Queen Isabella finally says that there's only unity of faith in Spain, and that there can be no diversity of faith. Two interesting incidents sort of capture your attention. She orders, of course, her and her husband Ferdinand, but they ordered a massive burning of, estimates vary, but at least 5,000 Qur'ans. And one of the remarkable things is they're offended by how lavishly the Qur'an is decorated and all the artwork. This is before artwork enters into the biblical text. This is a later development. But this massive public burning of Qur'ans, we know that history lost. There was a point, the more artistic, the more creative the text that they found, the more intent they were on its destruction. The other thing is that they ordered public baths to be closed, right? And interestingly, the inquisitors, part of what they said was that public baths tend to increase eroticism, which angers God. And think of the similarity between what we were talking about yesterday. I mean, sort of the Puritans in their attitude towards imagination, and that imagination is by nature fitna and bad and heretical and temptation. And very, they quite, you see these clear parallels between them, and for instance, the inquisitors or the theology that resulted in the expulsion of Muslims from Andalus or the forcible conversion. In that they also, part of what troubles them about these Muslim Spaniards, contrary, to popular myths, they're not. They're not Arabs. Many of them were, like Bosnian Muslims. Many of them were converts. Part of what really bothered them is they're seen as too free, as a threat to Christian piety, not because of Islamic belief, but because of their love of cleanliness and love of art and love of music and love of. And this is fascinating because it wasn't. There was a process by which the Inquisition convinced Queen Isabella and Ferdinand to get rid of these Muslims. And what the Inquisition was saying all along is, listen, she was saying, well, we could isolate them geographically, and we could, anyone that of them that preaches Islam to a Christian could be promptly executed, and anyone that converts from Christianity to Islam could be executed, and all of that. But the Inquisition said, no, listen, they they create temptation just by the fact of their existence because of their attitude towards life and towards religiosity, towards piety.